The morning sun peeked through the curtains as 11-year-old Zara got ready for her first day at Lincoln Middle School. She stood in front of the mirror, admiring the neat box braids her mother had spent all weekend perfecting. Each braid was carefully done with love and care, a beautiful connection to her heritage that made her feel proud. "You look perfect," her mother had said before leaving town to care for Grandma who wasn't feeling well. "Remember what your dad always says about your hair." Zara smiled at her reflection. "My hair is my crown," she whispered to herself, touching one of the braids gently. Her father, a lieutenant colonel in the military, knocked on her bedroom door. "Breakfast is ready, sunshine. Big day ahead." In the kitchen, Dad had prepared her favorite breakfast, blueberry pancakes with a smiley face made of banana slices. He wasn't the best cook, but since Mom left 3 days ago, he'd been trying his hardest. "Nervous about the new school?" he asked, pouring orange juice into her cup. Zara nodded, pushing her pancakes around the plate. "What if nobody likes me?" Her father sat down beside her, his kind eyes meeting hers. "They'd be fools not to like you. Just be yourself, and the right friends will come along." He checked his watch. He was wearing his formal uniform today for an important meeting at the base. "Will there be other kids who look like me?" Zara asked quietly. Their move to this new town meant she would be one of the few black students at Lincoln Middle. Her father's expression softened. "Maybe not many, but that makes you even more special. You carry our family's strength and beauty with you." He gently touched one of her braids. "Your hair tells our story. Never let anyone make you feel small because of who you are." The drive to school was filled with her father's funny stories about his own school days, helping Zara forget her worries for a little while. As they pulled up to the school building, her stomach tightened with butterflies. "Remember," her father said as she grabbed her backpack, "stand tall, be kind, and if you need anything at all, you call me, okay?" Zara nodded and gave him a quick hug before stepping out of the car. She watched him drive away, heading to the military base for his meeting. Taking a deep breath, she turned toward the school entrance, clutching her schedule tightly. The hallways buzzed with students rushing to their lockers and classrooms. Zara felt the curious glances as she walked by. Some kids stared a bit too long at her braids, while others quickly looked away when she caught their eye. She remembered her father's words and kept her head high. Finding her locker took some time, and she was almost late to her first class. The teacher, Mrs. Huang, welcomed her warmly and introduced her to the class. "We're happy to have you join us, Zara." By lunchtime, Zara had spoken to a few classmates who seemed friendly enough. A girl named Lily invited her to sit at her table, pointing out the cafeteria's best and worst food options. Things were going better than expected until art class, the last period of the day. As soon as Zara walked in, she noticed the teacher watching her. Unlike her other teachers, this one's smile didn't reach her eyes. The nameplate on her desk read, "Ms. Peterson." "Find a seat quickly," Ms. Peterson said sharply. "We don't waste time in my classroom." Zara hurried to an empty seat near the window. As Ms. Peterson took attendance, her eyes lingered on Zara longer than the other students. "Today we'll be starting a self-portrait project," Ms. Peterson announced. "Art requires discipline and following instructions precisely." She walked between the desks, handing out paper. When she reached Zara, she paused. "Your hair," Ms. Peterson said, her voice carrying across the now silent classroom. "It's quite elaborate, isn't it?" Something in her tone made Zara's chest tighten. She touched one of her braids instinctively, remembering her father's words from that morning. This was going to be harder than she thought, but she was a lieutenant colonel's daughter. She could handle whatever came her way. At least, that's what she believed as the final bell rang, not knowing what tomorrow would bring. The next morning, Zara took extra time getting ready for school. She carefully smoothed her edges and made sure each braid was perfectly in place. Yesterday's strange interaction with Ms. Peterson kept replaying in her mind. Something about the way the teacher had looked at her hair made her uneasy. "Dad, is my hair okay for school?" she asked as her father packed her lunch. He looked up, surprised. "Of course it is. Your mom did a beautiful job with those braids." "Why? Did someone say something?" Zara shrugged, not wanting to worry him. "Just asking." Her father studied her face for a moment. "Remember what I always tell you." "My hair is my crown," she finished with a small smile. I know. When Zara arrived at art class that afternoon, she chose a seat in the back, hoping to avoid Ms. Peterson's attention. But within minutes of the bell ringing, the teacher was standing over her desk. "Students, take out your supplies," Ms. Peterson announced to the class before lowering her voice. "Zara, I need to speak with you privately." Heart-pounding, Zara followed Ms. Peterson to the hallway. The teacher's lips were pressed into a thin line as she looked down at Zara. "Your hairstyle is quite distracting," Ms. Peterson said flatly. "It's not suitable for a proper learning environment." Zara blinked in surprise. "My braids? But they're just—" "At Lincoln Middle School, we have standards," Ms. Peterson interrupted. "Hair should be neat and tidy. Your style is too elaborate." Zara felt her cheeks grow hot. She remembered the school handbook her father had read through with her. There was nothing in there about braids being against the rules. "Ms. Peterson, my hairstyle is within school guidelines," Zara said politely, her voice barely above a whisper. "And it's important in my culture." The teacher's eyebrows rose. "Culture has nothing to do with classroom rules, young lady. I've been teaching here for 20 years, and I know what's appropriate." A few students peeked through the classroom door, curious about their conversation. Zara had never felt so embarrassed. "By the end of this week, I expect to see a more suitable hairstyle," Ms. Peterson continued. "Otherwise, there will be consequences. Do I make myself clear?" Zara nodded silently, fighting back tears. As they re-entered the classroom, she could feel everyone's eyes on her. The art project, creating a self-portrait, suddenly felt like a cruel joke. For the rest of class, Zara kept her head down, focusing on her sketch. The girl sitting next to her, Lily from lunch yesterday, quietly passed her a note. "Don't listen to her. Your hair is beautiful." The small act of kindness helped Zara make it through the period, but as soon as the final bell rang, she rushed to the bathroom and locked herself in a stall. Only then did she let the tears fall. When she finally composed herself, she pulled out her phone and called her mother, forgetting about the time difference at Grandma's house. "Honey, what's wrong?" Her mother's sleepy voice came through after several rings. "Mom," Zara's voice cracked. "My teacher says my braids aren't allowed. She says I have to change my hair by Friday." "What? That's ridiculous." Her mother sounded fully awake now. "There's nothing in the school rules about braids. Did she say why?" "She said they're distracting and not suitable," Zara explained, trying to keep her voice steady as other girls entered the bathroom. "Listen to me," her mother said firmly. "Your braids are beautiful and appropriate. Don't you change a thing. I'll call your father right now, and we'll sort this out." That evening, Zara sat at the kitchen table while her father made phone calls. First to her mother, then to someone he called an old army buddy who's now a school board member. "Sunshine, you don't need to worry," he told her after hanging up. "What your teacher said was wrong. The school has no policy against cultural hairstyles. In fact, there are laws protecting your right to wear your hair in braids." Zara pushed her dinner around her plate. "But what if she gets mad at me tomorrow?" Her father reached across the table and took her hand. "Then we'll handle it together. I promise." That night, Zara struggled to fall asleep. She kept picturing Miss Peterson's disapproving face, wondering what would happen when she showed up tomorrow with her braids still intact. Deep down, she knew her parents were right. She shouldn't have to change her hair. But standing up to a teacher was going to take all the courage she had. 3 days had passed since Ms. Peterson's warning, and Zara had continued to wear her braids proudly. Each morning, her father would give her an encouraging nod as he dropped her off at school. "Remember who you are," he'd say before driving off to the base. So far, Ms. Peterson had done nothing more than shoot disapproving glances in her direction during art class. Zara had started to hope that maybe the teacher had forgotten about the whole thing or changed her mind. That hope vanished the moment she walked into art class on Thursday afternoon. Ms. Peterson was standing at the front of the room, her face twisted with irritation. The classroom felt unusually tense, and Zara noticed several students glancing nervously between her and the teacher. "Today we'll be working with watercolors," Ms. Peterson announced, her voice sharper than usual. "I expect everyone to be extremely careful with their materials." As Zara took her seat, Ms. Peterson walked around distributing paper and paint sets. When she reached Zara's desk, she practically slammed the materials down, causing several students to jump. "I see you've chosen to ignore my instructions about your hair," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Zara's stomach nodded. "My parents stayed." "I'm not interested in what your parents said," Ms. Peterson cut her off. "This is my classroom." Lily, sitting nearby, gave Zara a sympathetic look. A few other students shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Zara tried to focus on her painting, a landscape scene the class was copying from a reference photo. She carefully dipped her brush into the blue watercolor, trying to steady her shaking hand. Ms. Peterson paced around the room, stopping frequently behind Zara's chair, her presence looming like a storm cloud. "More water," she would snap, or "that line is crooked," making corrections that she didn't make for other students. Halfway through the class, Zara reached for the cup of water to clean her brush. Her elbow, tense from the constant scrutiny, bumped against the paint set. Blue watercolor splashed onto her sleeve and a tiny drop landed on her paper. "That's it." Ms. Peterson's voice boomed across the classroom. Everyone froze. "This is exactly the kind of carelessness I expected." Zara looked up in shock. "I'm sorry, it was just an accident." "An accident that wouldn't have happened if you could see properly," Ms. Peterson said, leaning down close to Zara's face. "Your unruly hair is probably blocking your vision." The room fell completely silent. Zara felt tears threatening to fall but blinked them back. She would not cry in front of this woman. "Pack up your things," Ms. Peterson ordered. "You're going to the administrative office." "But why?" Zara asked, her voice barely audible. "Your hairstyle is not only violating school policy, it's now compromising safety in my classroom." Ms. Peterson gestured dramatically at the tiny paint spill. "This kind of disruption cannot continue." Zara slowly gathered her belongings, aware of 20 pairs of eyes watching her. Lily mouthed sorry as she passed by. "The handbook doesn't say anything about braids being against the rules," Zara said quietly but firmly as she stood by her desk. Miss Peterson's nostrils flared. "Are you arguing with me, young lady?" "No, ma'am. I'm just saying." "That's enough. Follow me." Miss Peterson marched toward the door, expecting Zara to follow. As they left the classroom, Miss Peterson turned to the students. "Continue working. I'll be back shortly." In the empty hallway, Zara's heart pounded. She had expected to be taken to the principal's office, but Miss Peterson turned in the opposite direction. "Where are we going?" Zara asked, struggling to keep up with the teacher's long strides. "Since no one else seems willing to enforce proper standards at this school, I'm handling this myself," Miss Peterson replied without looking back. They passed the main office, where the secretary was busy on the phone. Zara wanted to call out for help, but the words stuck in her throat. Her father had taught her to respect teachers and authority figures, but something about this felt wrong. Miss Peterson stopped in front of the nurse's office door and checked inside. "Perfect, she's at lunch," she muttered, then pulled Zara by the arm into the empty room. As the door closed behind them, Zara felt a chill run down her spine. Miss Peterson's face had transformed into something cold and determined. For the first time, Zara felt truly afraid. "Sit down," Miss Peterson commanded, pointing to a chair in the corner. "It's time we solved this problem once and for all." The nurse's office felt smaller than it should have. Zara perched on the edge of the chair, her backpack still on her shoulders like she might need to run. The room smelled of antiseptic and something else, like the hair salon her mother took her to back in their old neighborhood. Miss Peterson rummaged through a drawer, her back to Zara. "Since your parents won't teach you proper grooming," she said without turning around, "I'll have to handle it myself." When the teacher finally faced her again, Zara's breath caught in her throat. Miss Peterson was holding a pair of scissors in one hand and what looked like electric clippers in the other. "What are you doing?" Zara asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Solving our little problem." Miss Peterson placed the items on the counter and reached into her bag, pulling out a plastic cape like the ones barbers use. "Your hair is unacceptable for this learning environment, and clearly no one else is going to address it." Zara stood up quickly, nearly knocking over the chair. "You can't cut my hair." "Sit down, young lady." Miss Peterson's voice was ice cold. "This defiant attitude is exactly why you need discipline." Zara backed toward the door. I want to call my dad. Your father isn't in charge here. Ms. Peterson moved between Zara and the door. I've been teaching for 20 years, and I've seen what happens when students are allowed to ignore the rules. Now sit down. The teacher's sudden shout made Zara flinch. She'd never heard an adult at school yell like that before. Fear made her legs weak as she sank back into the chair. This won't take long, Miss Peterson said, draping the cape around Zara's shoulders and fastening it tightly at the neck. Then you'll be presentable, and we can put this whole business behind us. Tears welled in Zara's eyes. Please don't, she begged. My mom spent hours doing my braids. They're important to me. Miss Peterson ignored her, picking up the scissors. Hold still. The first snip sound echoed in Zara's ears like a gunshot. She felt a gentle weight release as one of her braids fell to the floor. Then another, and another. Tears streamed down her face, dropping onto the plastic cape. With each braid that fell, Zara felt like a piece of herself was being cut away too. Her mother's loving hands had crafted those braids. Her father had called them her crown. Stop crying, Miss Peterson said sharply. This is for your own good. The door to the nurse's office suddenly opened. Mr. Chen, the history teacher from down the hall, stood in the doorway with a first aid kit in his hand. What's going on here? He asked, eyes widening at the scene before him. Zara in tears, half her braids gone, and Miss Peterson standing over her with scissors. Miss Peterson barely glanced at him. I'm helping this student comply with proper hygiene standards. The nurse let me use the room. Mr. Chen looked doubtful. Did the principal approve this? I don't need approval to enforce school rules, Miss Peterson replied, turning back to Zara. We're almost done here. Mr. Chen hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. I just needed some bandages, but I'll come back later. He backed out of the room, closing the door behind him. Zara's last hope walked away with him. She sat rigid with shock as Miss Peterson finished cutting off her braids and reached for the electric clippers. These will even everything out, the teacher said, turning them on. The buzzing sound filled the small room. Zara closed her eyes as she felt the cold metal against her scalp. The vibration sent chills down her spine as Miss Peterson moved the clippers across her head in uneven strokes. She could feel her hair, her beautiful hair that connected her to her heritage, that her parents had taught her to be proud of, falling away with each pass. When it was finally over, Miss Peterson stepped back to inspect her work. There, she said with satisfaction. Much better. Now you look like a proper student. She handed Zara a small mirror from the nurse's desk. The face that looked back was almost unrecognizable. Her head was unevenly shaved, with patches of different lengths. In some spots, the clippers had cut so close that her scalp showed. Clean up this mess and get back to class, Miss Peterson instructed, gesturing to the braids scattered across the floor. And remember, this was necessary because you refused to follow instructions. As the teacher packed up her things, Zara sat motionless, still staring at her reflection. The mirror slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. When Miss Peterson finally left, locking the door behind her, Zara curled into herself and let out a silent scream of anguish. Zara couldn't bring herself to return to class. After Miss Peterson left, she sat frozen in the nurse's chair for what felt like hours, though the clock on the wall showed only minutes had passed. When she finally moved, it was to pick up the scattered braids from the floor. She gathered each one carefully, placing them in her backpack as if they were precious treasures, which to her they were. The hallways were empty as students were still in class. Zara walked with her head down, one hand constantly touching her now exposed scalp. She felt naked and vulnerable. The bathroom seemed like the only safe place to hide. Inside the largest stall, Zara locked the door and sank to the floor. She pulled out her phone with trembling hands, her vision blurred by tears. She needed her dad. Only he could make this right. It took 3 attempts to dial his number correctly. Each ring felt like forever until finally, his familiar voice answered. Hey, sunshine, everything okay? The sound of his warm greeting broke the last of Zara's composure. A sob escaped her throat. Dad, she managed between gasps for air. She cut it. Miss Peterson cut off all my hair. The line went silent for a moment. When her father spoke again, his voice was different, calm in a way that somehow seemed more serious than if he had shouted. "Zara, I need you to tell me exactly what happened." His words were measured, deliberate. Between sobs, Zara explained everything. The art class incident, being taken to the nurse's office, the scissors, the clippers, how no one helped her even when Mr. Chen walked in. "She said it was for my own good," Zara whispered, her voice raw from crying. "She said I needed discipline." Another pause on the line. Zara could hear muffled voices in the background. Her father must have been in the middle of something important at the base. "Are you safe right now?" he finally asked. "I'm hiding in the bathroom," Zara replied. "I can't let anyone see me like this." "Listen to me carefully," her father said. "I want you to stay exactly where you are. Find a stall, lock the door, and don't come out until I get there. Don't talk to Ms. Peterson or any other teachers. Just wait for me. Can you do that?" "Yes," Zara whispered. "I'm leaving right now," he said. "I'll be there in 20 minutes, maybe less." "Dad." Zara's voice cracked. "I'm scared." His voice softened for just a moment. "I know, sunshine. But I promise you, this will never, ever happen again. Not to you, not to anyone." Then his tone changed back to that controlled calm. "Stay put. I'm on my way." The line went dead, and Zara pulled her knees to her chest, making herself as small as possible in the corner of the stall. Outside, she could hear the distant sound of classroom doors opening, a period change. Footsteps and voices approached the bathroom, and she held her breath. Several girls entered, their casual chatter about homework and weekend plans sounding impossibly normal. Zara stayed absolutely still, praying they wouldn't notice her shoes under the stall door. "Did you see what happened in Ms. Peterson's class?" one voice asked. "With the new girl?" "Yeah, that was messed up," another replied. "Lily said Ms. Peterson practically dragged her out." "I heard they went to the office," a third voice added. "No way," the first voice said. "My brother saw them going into the nurse's room. He said the new girl was crying." Their voices faded as they left the bathroom, and Zara released the breath she'd been holding. The news was already spreading. Soon everyone would know, and they'd all stare at her shaved head. The thought made fresh tears slide down her cheeks. Time crawled by. Zara kept checking her phone. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15. She tried to imagine what her father was doing right now. Had he dropped everything at work? Was he in trouble for leaving? Would he be wearing his uniform? Just as the final bell of the day rang, signaling the end of classes, Zara's phone lit up with a text message. "I'm here. Coming to find you." Relief washed over her like a wave. Dad was here. He would know what to do. From outside the bathroom, she could hear a growing commotion. Adult voices raised in surprise. A deep, commanding voice that she recognized immediately, her father's work voice, the one he used when giving orders at the base. He was coming, and from the sound of it, the entire school was about to learn exactly who Zara's father was. Zara heard him before she saw him. The bathroom door pushed open, and her father's voice called out, "Zara? Are you in here, honey?" She unlocked the stall door with shaking hands. There he stood in his full military uniform, the formal one with all the medals and badges across his chest. The sight of him, so strong and certain in the middle of the girls' bathroom, would have made her laugh on any other day. Today, it just made her cry harder. His eyes widened when he saw her head. For just a second, his carefully controlled expression slipped, revealing a flash of pure anger that Zara had never seen before. Then, quickly as it had appeared, the look was replaced with gentle concern as he knelt down to her level. "Oh, sunshine," he whispered, carefully touching the uneven patches of hair on her head. "I'm so sorry this happened to you." Zara fell into his arms, sobbing against the stiff fabric of his uniform jacket. He held her tight, one hand protectively covering her shaved head. "Listen to me," he said after a moment, pulling back to look her in the eyes. "What happened to you was wrong. It was against the law, against school policy, and against basic human decency. And I promise you it won't go unanswered." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a soft knit beanie. "Your mom packed this in your winter bag. I grabbed it from home on my way here." Zara took the hat gratefully, pulling it over her head. It didn't hide everything, but it helped her feel less exposed. "Now," her father said, standing to his full height, "let's go find Miss Peterson." Zara followed him out of the bathroom, staying close to his side. Students still lingering in the hallways turned to stare at the tall military officer striding purposefully through their school. Some pointed, others whispered. Zara kept her eyes on the floor. The main office staff looked startled when they entered. "Sir, can we help you?" the secretary asked, glancing nervously at his uniform. "Lieutenant Colonel Wilson," he stated clearly. "I'm here regarding an incident involving my daughter and a teacher named Ms. Peterson." The secretary's eyes darted to Zara, then back to her father. "The principal is in a meeting, but—" "This can't wait," he said firmly. "Where is Ms. Peterson now?" "I believe she's in the teacher's lounge," the secretary replied, reaching for the phone. "Let me call." But Zara's father was already turning away. "Thank you, we'll find it." The teacher's lounge was at the end of the main hallway. Without hesitation, her father pushed open the door and stepped inside, Zara still at his side. 4 teachers sat around a table with coffee mugs and papers. Miss Peterson was among them, her back to the door. The room fell completely silent as everyone turned to look at the uniformed officer in their doorway. One teacher nearly spilled his coffee. Miss Peterson slowly turned in her chair. The color drained from her face when she saw who was standing there. "Miss Peterson." Zara's father's voice was dangerously quiet. The teacher stood up, smoothing her skirt nervously. "Yes? Can I help you?" "I'm Lieutenant Colonel Wilson, Zara's father." He stepped forward, his posture perfectly straight, hands clasped behind his back. "I understand you took it upon yourself to assault my daughter and destroy her cultural identity today." The other teachers exchanged alarmed glances. One of them, an older woman, gasped softly. Miss Peterson's face hardened. "I was enforcing school dress code policies. The student's hair was inappropriate and—" "Show me that policy." Her father's voice cut through the room like a knife. "Excuse me." Ms. Peterson blinked. "Show me the written policy that gives you the right to physically restrain a child and cut off her hair against her will." Ms. Peterson's mouth opened and closed. "Well, it's understood that—" "Nothing is understood when it comes to violating a child's bodily autonomy," he interrupted, his voice still measured but firm. "What you did today wasn't discipline, it was assault." Just then, the principal hurried into the room, looking flustered. "I was told there was a situation." He stopped short when he saw Zara's father. "Perfect timing," her father said. "We need to discuss what happened to my daughter today and the immediate steps your school will be taking to address it." He reached into his jacket and pulled out several folded papers. "These are copies of the actual school policy on dress code, which explicitly protects cultural hairstyles. And this," he added, placing another document on the table, "is the state law prohibiting discrimination based on natural hair." The principal looked confused until Zara reluctantly removed her hat. His eyes widened in shock. "Miss Peterson did this?" he asked in disbelief. The other teachers in the room were now staring at their colleague with expressions ranging from confusion to disgust. "Yes," Zara's father confirmed. "And I want everyone in this room to understand that what happened today will not be ignored, excused, or forgotten." The next morning, Zara sat at the kitchen table while her father made pancakes. She hadn't gone back to school today. Instead, her parents had scheduled a meeting with the school superintendent for the afternoon. "How's your mom doing?" her father asked, flipping a pancake with practiced ease. Zara glanced at her phone. "Still really upset. She keeps saying she's coming home early." "I told her to stay with Grandma," her father replied. "We can handle this, and Grandma needs her right now." Last night, Zara had video called her mother, who had cried at the sight of Zara's uneven shaved head. There had been a lot of angry words, mostly from her mother to her father, about why he hadn't checked the school more carefully before enrolling Zara. "It's not your fault, Dad," Zara said quietly. He turned from the stove, spatula in hand. "Part of it is. I should have been more careful, but what matters now is making sure this never happens to another child." After the confrontation in the teacher's lounge, things had moved quickly. The principal had immediately suspended Miss Peterson pending an investigation. Security footage from the hallway had confirmed Zara's account of being taken to the nurse's office instead of the administrative office. Mr. Chen had come forward about what he had seen, clearly upset that he hadn't done more to help. Her father set a plate of pancakes in front of her. "The superintendent called this morning before you woke up. They've already fired Ms. Peterson." Zara poked at her breakfast. "Will everyone at school know what happened?" "Some of it, yes," he admitted. "But you don't have to worry about facing it alone. The principal promised to address it properly." Later that afternoon, Zara sat between her parents in the superintendent's office as several adults discussed what had happened. Some faces she recognized: the principal, the school board president who had come to their house for dinner last week, her father's old army buddy. Others were new: a woman who introduced herself as from the Department of Education, and a man in a suit who was apparently the school district's lawyer. The superintendent, a gray-haired woman with kind eyes, spoke directly to Zara. "I am deeply sorry for what happened to you. It was wrong, and it never should have occurred in one of our schools." The school board president nodded. "We've already begun reviewing all our policies to make sure they explicitly protect students' cultural hairstyles, and we're implementing mandatory cultural sensitivity training for all staff." "That's a start," Zara's father said, "but it doesn't address the harm already done to my daughter." The district lawyer cleared his throat. "We understand that, sir. The district is prepared to offer." "This isn't about money," her father interrupted. "This is about making meaningful change." Over the next hour, Zara listened as the adults worked out a plan. The school would create new, clearer policies. Teachers would receive training. A formal apology would be issued. And perhaps most importantly to Zara, her experience would help strengthen laws protecting other kids from similar discrimination. 2 weeks later, Zara stood in front of her bedroom mirror, running her hand over the soft fuzz growing on her head. It wasn't much, but it was something. Her mother had ordered special oils and creams to help it grow healthy and strong. "Ready for school?" her father asked from the doorway. Zara adjusted her new head wrap, a beautiful piece of fabric in bright colors that her grandmother had sent. "I think so." Things had changed at Lincoln Middle School. When Zara returned, the principal had held a special assembly about respect and cultural awareness. Without naming Zara, he had made it clear that what happened was wrong and would never be tolerated again. To her surprise, many students had approached her with support. Lily had become a true friend, sitting with her at lunch and walking with her between classes. Even more surprisingly, several teachers had quietly thanked her for being brave enough to stand up, saying the school needed this wake-up call. 6 months passed and spring arrived. Zara's hair had grown into a short, natural style that she was beginning to love. The local newspaper had done a story about what happened, and other schools in the area had revised their policies too. One warm Saturday, Zara stood nervously on a small stage at the community center. Her parents sat in the front row, beaming with pride. Behind them, dozens of young people and their families filled the seats. "My name is Zara," she began, her voice shaky at first but growing stronger. 6 months ago, someone tried to take away my identity by cutting my hair. They thought they were teaching me a lesson about fitting in. But instead, they taught me something much more important, that some things are worth standing up for, no matter how scary it might be." As she continued her speech, she saw her father wipe away a tear. Her mother was recording everything on her phone, probably already planning to send it to Grandma. "Your hair is your crown," Zara told the crowd, echoing her father's words from what felt like a lifetime ago. "But your voice, that's your power, and no one can take that away." The room erupted in applause. Zara smiled, touching her new growth of hair. It was different than before, but it was hers, and she had never felt more beautiful or more proud.